He saved the lion's life. Then the world left the lion to grieve alone. No one believed an animal could mourn like that, let alone remember. But Aslan's silent return proved love doesn't vanish. It waits. And what happened next will leave you breathless as justice finds its quiet, powerful way back. At the outer rim of an ancient forest, where the mist drifted like old prayers over the quiet plains of Arizona, the air held a kind of stillness that didn't feel like silence. It felt like waiting. A long line of cars stretched back to the dirt road, their engines off, their doors open, forgotten. People had gathered, dressed in black, their shoes sinking slightly into the dew-kissed earth. Some held each other, some stood alone, but all of them were watching the same thing. Not the casket, not the freshly turned soil, not even the name on the wooden plaque that read Jacob Reed. They were watching the lion. He stood a few dozen feet away, just beyond the edge of the crowd, framed by tall cypress trees that swayed gently above his head like sentinels. His name was Aslan. His mane, golden and windswept, looked like something the sun had sculpted. His eyes were locked on the grave. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just stood there. Tall, quiet, and impossibly still. He was the only one not dressed for mourning, and yet no one there looked more consumed by it. A decade earlier, in the heat and neglect of a failing safari park on the edge of Texas, this same lion had been little more than a shadow in a cage, limping, skeletal, half forgotten. And it was there that Jacob Reed had found him. Jacob wasn't a man with power. He wasn't rich or famous. He was a volunteer with calloused hands who showed up every day when no one else wanted to. He was the kind of man who saw pain and didn't look away. The kind who didn't believe in lost causes. Jacob had knelt outside the cage for days, whispering not in command but in kindness. He paid for Aslan's medical care himself, sold his own truck to get the lion transported to safety, and when all the experts warned him it was foolish to take in a wild creature, Jacob looked them in the eye and simply said, "He's already home." He built a space for him on his ranch, surrounded by trees and soft earth. Each morning, Jacob greeted him the same way. "Good morning, King." And each night, as stars lit the sky over Arizona, he whispered, "Till tomorrow, brother." It wasn't a joke. It wasn't a game. It was a promise. But this morning was not like the others. There would be no tomorrow, no familiar voice calling out, no outstretched hand or shared sunrise. And Aslan knew. As he stepped forward, the crowd parted instinctively, not in fear, but in awe. Security froze. Phones trembled in hands, but no one moved to stop him. The lion walked slowly, each step heavy with understanding, his eyes never leaving the coffin. When he reached it, he didn't roar. He didn't paw at the earth or thrash in grief. Instead, with a grace that silenced even the wind, he bowed his great head and lowered himself beside the wooden box. Not like a pet lying beside its owner, not like a beast returning to its master, like a soul honoring another. He pressed his head lightly to the earth, and for a moment that felt carved out of time, nothing else in the world existed. The forest, the sky, the mourners, all faded. There was only him, and the man who gave him more than life, who gave him meaning. No one dared break the moment. No one could. And then in a voice just above a whisper, a frail woman stepped forward. Jacob's mother. Her words floated through the air like a breath. He understood. It was not just an ending. It was a beginning. The kind that leaves something behind, not in stone, but in spirit. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind you carry with you. After the funeral, silence settled. Not just around the ranch, but inside everything. In the trees, in the wind, in the empty porch swing that used to creak beneath a familiar rhythm of morning boots. But the loudest silence of all came from the absence of one being. Aslan was gone. He didn't return to the ranch. He didn't touch the food left out each morning. He didn't seek out the volunteers who once fed him, brushed his coat, or whispered gently to him through the fence. He simply vanished, as if following a voice only he could hear. For days, no one saw him. Not a paw print, not a shadow. It was as though the lion had dissolved into the land. Then, nearly a week later, a truck driver stopped along an old dirt road to fix a side mirror. What he saw in the distance made him freeze. Just past a line of bent mailboxes and dry brush, a lion lay beside a long-abandoned school bus stop, head low, body still, breathing barely visible. It was the same place where Jacob Reed used to spend every morning before work, handing out apples to local kids and reading them stories while they waited for the bus. He called it his morning kindness ritual, and he believed it mattered just as much as feeding animals. He said children deserved to start the day with a story and a smile. That's where Aslan had gone, not by accident, by memory. He stayed there day after day, unmoving, unbothered by the shifting air or the occasional curious animal. The winds that once teased his mane now passed without resistance. Coyotes circled but never approached. Aslan wasn't defending territory. He wasn't surviving. He was waiting. And in that stillness, he became more than a lion. He became a witness to love, to grief, to the echo of a voice that once said good morning and meant it. Then one evening, a boy came. He was small, maybe 7. A backpack hung crooked on his shoulders, and he clutched a book to his chest like it meant more than anything else he owned. His name was Caleb. He knew Jacob. Years ago, Jacob had sold his old pickup to help pay for Caleb's surgery. He'd done it without ever telling the boy why. Caleb approached slowly, his steps careful but not afraid. He stopped just a few feet away from the lion and gently laid the book in the grass. "This is yours now," he whispered. "He used to read it to me when I was scared. You're my hero now, okay?" For a long moment, Aslan didn't move. Then, slowly, softly, he lifted his head. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't fierce. It was quiet, like a thread catching the wind. He leaned forward and sniffed the book. Its pages carried the scent of coffee, dust, and sunshine. The scent of Jacob's office, his hands, his stories. Something changed in Aslan's eyes then. Not grief, not despair, recognition and meaning. Because in that moment, he remembered not just the man he had lost, but the reason he had mattered. And that memory, that quiet spark of purpose, lit something inside him that pain could never extinguish. It didn't erase the sorrow, but it gave it shape. And through that shape came something stronger, something that could carry forward. From that day forward, Aslan began to return, not with fanfare, not with the roaring majesty one might expect of a lion, but with silence, with intention, with grace. He appeared first at the ranch, not in the enclosures, not by the feeding stations, but on the porch of Jacob's old house. He lay beside the steps where the morning sun used to spill through the screen door, and he didn't move, not for hours. Not even when the volunteers tried calling his name. He was home. And for now, that was enough. Then, slowly, he started to follow the people Jacob once worked with, Asachot. The young men and women who had learned to care for animals the way Jacob had, patiently, gently, without fear. Aslan never got in the way. He simply watched. When a dog cried in pain, he stayed near. When a horse flinched in fear, he stood still. He didn't growl. He didn't command attention. He guarded, quietly, peacefully, like he understood the sacredness of the work being done. Word spread quickly, first among locals, then beyond. They called him the grieving lion. Stories filled headlines. The king who mourns. The guardian of the ranch. Journalists came, scientists, skeptics. Some expected to find a staged tale or a tamed animal trained for show, but what they found was different. They found presence, dignity, a creature who moved not like a beast, but like a soul carrying something weightless and heavy all at once. He was no longer just a lion. He was a keeper of memory. And the place where his story began, the spot where he had first bowed his head beside Jacob's grave, became something more. 1 year later, a sanctuary was built there. They named it Aslan's Promise, not as a monument to grief, but as a living tribute to loyalty, to strength, to a kind of love that can't be spoken, only shown. Visitors came from every corner of the country. Children read books under the trees. Animals healed in peace. and volunteers told the story again and again, not just of a man who saved a lion, but of a lion who carried that love until his very last breath. Because one quiet morning, Aslan lay beside the grave again. This time, he didn't rise. The sky was soft, the wind was gentle, and the earth, somehow, felt ready. He closed his eyes and didn't open them again. Some said it was his age, that his heart had simply slowed and stopped. But Jacob's mother, standing beneath the cypress, with a hand over her chest, smiled through her tears. "He waited," she said. "Now he's with him again." And in that moment, everyone understood. This was not a tragedy. It was a reunion, because sometimes even a lion can teach us that love, real, enduring, soul-deep love, doesn't end. It just finds its way home.